Please welcome Marc Brackett, Director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence.
So I guess my job is to ask everyone how they're feeling. Seriously. I'm just going to jump right in. So I'm going to start off with just teaching a tool. We call this tool the mood meter. And the mood meter has two axes. It has a pleasantness axis, so that's what's going on for you right here, and an energy axis, which is giving you information about your body. So I'm going to ask you to just take a few seconds and think about where might you be right now. Are you in the yellow, high energy and pleasant? Are you in the red, high energy but unpleasant? Or are you lower in energy in the blue or green? Let me see, how many of you are in the yellow? Wow, everybody's hungry, I guess. How about green? Your energy, you're kind of pleasant but lower in energy, all right? How about blue or red? Any blue or red people in the room? All right, a few honest people. I'd like you to take a second and just try to replace your plot or your color with a word. What might be the best word to describe how you're feeling right now? And freeze. Let me get an honest raise of hands. How many of you had some trouble finding the best word? Hands up high. Really, really high. Look around the room. So it's interesting, right? So many of us are asked how we're feeling, or we're not asked how we're feeling. And when we're trying to find that word, oftentimes we get stuck. And it's kind of the foundation of our work on emotional intelligence. We'll get into the details in a minute. I wanted to share with you last year, I had the opportunity to do a study funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation in collaboration with Born This Way Foundation, which was founded by Lady Gaga and her mom. And what we did is we scanned 45,000 high school students across the nation. And we asked them to describe in their own words how they felt as a student in their school. And I think the data are pretty alarming, at least in my opinion. What we found was that 75% of the words that high school students used to describe how they felt in school were negative. And then we asked them, well, what percentage of the time do you feel that way? And we got things like 70% of the time bored, 80% of the time stressed. And you may ask, well, what are we going to do about that? Well, in our center, what we care a lot about is how people feel. And there are 5 key reasons why we care. The first is in our work on attention, memory, and learning, that how you're feeling right now. Right? If you're kind of in that deep green, kind of chilling out, your attentional capacity is going to be different than if you're feeling high energy and curious or optimistic. If you're feeling stressed out, you're probably thinking about many other things in your life other than being here. Our work on decision making looks at how teachers, for example, their mood states bias the way they evaluate students. So we did a study, for example, where we randomly assigned teachers to be in a blue mood or a yellow mood, and then we had them evaluate a student's essay. And what we found was 1 to 2 full grade differences in the way teachers evaluated the student. When we asked the teachers, do you believe that how you felt influenced your decision on how to grade that paper, about 85% denied, saying, no, I don't think my feelings would have influenced. The third is relationship quality, that emotions drive the quality of our relationships. Does anyone here work with someone who displays a lot of negative emotion? Like a little this kind of this stuff around? Or like where I work, it's kind of this. And when you think about people who display a lot of negative feelings, how many of you say to yourself, I want to work with that person for the rest of my life? Right? We tend to want to avoid people who display a lot of negative emotions. The fourth is physical and mental health. What you should know is that for the first time in our nation's history, adolescents are more stressed out than the adults who are raising them. And finally, a lot of our research focuses on everyday effectiveness or creativity. So we're doing studies, for example, looking at highly creative high schoolers and trying to unpack what are the underlying skills that help them to be creative. And one key skill that we're finding is that they have a unique ability to regulate their emotions effectively. So that leads us to, okay, so emotions matter. Well, then what are the skills that we might want to teach people to be more emotionally intelligent? And we describe 5 key skills. The first is recognizing emotions. So for example, I'm looking at the audience and a little worried right now. No, just kidding. But reading emotions in face and body and voice, paying attention to one's own emotional states, understanding where those feelings are coming from. For example, why am I feeling angry or sad or disappointed or frustrated? having the words to describe those feelings, knowing how and when to express emotions. For example, there are rules around whether or not we express our emotions, right? In different organizations, there's power, there's roles, there's culture, there's personality. And finally, there's the last skill of regulating emotions. What are the strategies that we use to regulate? Now, we spent a lot of time at our center trying to measure this set of skills. And there are a variety of things you could do. As you can see here, you can ask the person directly. So I just share with you the 5 skills of emotional intelligence: recognizing, understanding, labeling, expressing, and regulating. How many of you see yourselves as a 1? You're emotionally bankrupt. No one. How many of you have a 2? You're a tiny bit of emotional intelligence. No one. How about a 3? Kind of right in the middle, average. 2 people. How many of you see yourselves at a 4 or 5? Yeah. So here's the problem, right? Everyone sees themselves as above average. When I do this with my undergraduates at Yale, 80% of them say they're more emotionally intelligent than everybody else. So that's not a valid way. You can ask other people, but then you mostly find about their reputation. You can ask the person what strategies they might use, but they'll lie to you that they would use an effective strategy. You can observe the person in action, but it's hard to observe someone reading emotion. Right? You don't really know how they're reasoning with and about emotions. So what we do in our center is build performance tools. We literally create performance tools where people have to respond to stimuli and let us know their emotional abilities. What we like to say is that, unfortunately, self-knowledge is kind of limited. Think about it. How many of you receive feedback on how well you read people or manage your emotions? When I compare myself to my father, I'm a genius with my emotions. When I compare myself to the Dalai Lama, I need some work. When we measure these skills using performance tools and we correlate them and do other kinds of studies, what we find is that youth with lower emotional intelligence look like the column on the left, and the students with higher emotional intelligence look like the column on the right. So pretty important associations or outcomes associated with being emotionally intelligent. Even among leaders, what we find is leaders with lower EI, I won't describe any current leaders, leaders with higher emotional intelligence. Couldn't help myself, actually. And I didn't say anything. So our theory of change is pretty straightforward, right? We believe that first we have to create an emotions matter mindset. That we have to create a culture where people believe that emotions matter. And I don't think we're there yet. In my work, working with about 1,200 schools in my career, still trying to convince many educational leaders that how a child feels actually matters, or how a teacher feels. Our approach is training everybody. So what we learned early on, I was really interested in children. I was a kid who was bullied, who hated school, who was a C student. I know it's hard to believe that, but I was. And I tried to work with adolescents originally. How do I build a program to help middle schoolers survive? And I just failed continuously, because what I learned was that the adults who were involved in the education of children were not yet prepared to do what I was asking them to do. And then we worked with teachers. We had some more success, but then school leaders would come into the training and say things like, all right, good luck everybody, have a great day, and then they'd disappear. And then the teachers would say things like, my leader, my principal really needs your training. And then we're going to work with leaders. And then all of a sudden, about 8 years ago, the special ed district of New York City called me and said, Marc, we want to bring your program to 350 sites across 5 boroughs. I was like, all right, so we need to figure out how to scale this work and do a trainer of the trainer model and do district-wide implementation. And we learned through our research that really you have to do 2 things: develop the skills of each stakeholder and enhance what we call the emotional climate, that make the interactions and support more positive interactions among all stakeholders. And then what our research shows, you get the outcomes that we all care about: more engagement, better relationships, better health decisions, and all the academic stuff that people care so much about. So RULER is the name of our approach. It's also the acronym for the 5 skills of emotional intelligence. And like I said a moment ago, what we learned is that really to do good work in a school system, you need to make sure that you're training all stakeholders. And then we learned, you need to teach people certain tools. So we started developing tools. These are 4 of them. I won't get a chance to go through all of them today, but one tool we found was there's so many rules in schools. Why do we have so many rules? Like sit down, keep your hands to yourself. We don't really talk enough about, well, how do you want to feel as a student or a teacher in your school? What are things that we can do to create more positive feelings? So we created a tool we call the Emotional Intelligence Charter. The mood meter is that tool to build self-awareness. This meta moment tool is a tool we built that has a process for helping people manage difficult emotions. Do any of you have triggers here? Like for example, where I work, a trigger oftentimes when I'm teaching is, Professor Brackett, I've got a question, but I'm not really sure you know the answer. And in those moments, right, I do feel like going for the jugular, but I got to think about my best self. Wait a minute, you're the professor. So this tool has a component which we call seeing your best possible self. And what our research shows is that when you're triggered and you pause and you can activate that image of your best self, you tend to use more adaptive strategies. But of course, we make mistakes and we need to solve problems and manage conflicts, so we built a tool to help with that as well. So just give you some examples. This is actually a school here in New York, the Thurgood Marshall School uptown. In Harlem, that's Dawn DaCosta, the amazing leader. And that's her building her charter with her faculty. That's one in Guadalajara. This is a classroom one in Bridgeport, Connecticut. The mood meter is our other tool to help build self-awareness. And so many things go on with this tool. We teach people the facial expressions, the body language, the vocal tones, and physiology. We help you build that vocabulary to describe your emotions more accurately. We help you learn strategies that can support you in developing better emotional intelligence. We also work with teachers so they understand the value of differentiating instruction using emotion. That it's not just about skills for the self, it's about infusing these principles into the way we design our classrooms. There's some examples of this tool. It's one school in California built a whole art wall. That's an assembly. This is a school in Australia who built their playground with emotional intelligence. It's a game here in New York City that's the school leader. These are kids, I think, in a preschool up in Stamford, Connecticut. We even built an app because people said, well, I can't carry the poster with me. So how can I check in with myself and how can I get the frequencies with which I'm feeling these different emotions throughout the day, throughout the week? So what happens, you learn how to use a tool. You can plot yourself, gives you 100 feeling words. You can describe why. You can say, I want to shift. You can use strategies like pictures from your phone. And then you get to look at what percentage of the time you've been feeling that way to help guide and think about how you've been feeling and maybe your decisions and relationships that week. We've also collaborated with Facebook on a variety of projects. So I've been a consultant at Facebook. I built a system with Facebook to support bullying prevention initially, where when students were having troubles on Facebook, they didn't really have a thing to do. So we co-created a process where we could help students report the experience, but use the skills of emotional intelligence to help them get the support they needed. Reaches about 18 million students per month. And then I convinced Facebook to work with me on a much larger project we're calling Inspire Ed, which is for high schools. We've had a lot of trouble getting high schools to take this work seriously. So we built a whole platform for free that's available to high schools to support them in building student-led teams that help to create that inspiration and build that emotional intelligence skills throughout the school and district. We've got about 100 schools now. We're partnering with My Brother's Keeper Alliance across the nation, doing a roadshow this year. So lastly, what I'll share with you is that we do lots of research, and we have to know that this approach works. So in earlier studies, we showed that, yes, you can do this work, and it affects the things that people care about, like academic grades and school problems. Yes, it decreases suspensions. So in one study here in New York City, we showed after 1 year a 50% reduction in kids being referred to the office and suspensions. We've shown that we can shift, literally, observable emotional climate in schools through observational tools that look at the quality of interactions between and among teachers and students. We've showed that actually that emotional climate is a pathway towards helping teachers become better teachers themselves. That when your classroom has more positive emotions and people are more skilled, you can actually be a better teacher. And we've also shown that indeed it leads to higher academic grades and behavior grades. One thing we've also learned is that implementation fidelity really matters, because you can do really good work badly. So we need to monitor the quality. We need to monitor the dosage. And as you can see here in this one study, what we found was that indeed low quality resulted in students with lower skills at the end of the year, whereas high quality resulted in skills going up across the board. So we have a full implementation plan that we've worked on over the last 20 years. It starts with getting the buy-in, training district and school leaders, building implementation teams, teaching those people through an online portal to support their staff, and then embedding this into all aspects of the immune system of the school. I'll wrap up by just saying that we're now in phase 2 of our work. So we've reached about 1,200 schools. Our goal is to go to 10,000 schools over the next 5 years, which is an audacious goal, but the interest is there. And we're building what we call Ruler 2.0, which is a comprehensive dashboard to support schools. For example, rural schools that will never get a reach and they can't afford to come to see us, as well as large districts. For example, we're rolling out Ruler now in about 500 schools here in New York over the next couple of years. I'll end by just saying a few things. One, firstly, how many of you believe that emotions matter? All right, I did my job. Second is, oftentimes people talk about emotional intelligence as a soft skill. They even refer to it as non-cognitive, which drives people like me crazy. Like your brain is replete with emotions and cognitions, and they can work together or they can work in opposition. Emotional intelligence is a set of skills that helps your emotion system work in tandem with your cognitive system. Third is that we're showing that you can be 2 and you can be 92 and still learn these skills. You can always build your emotional vocabulary. You can always learn new strategies. There are tools. I showed you a few of them. The mood meter is one. Fourth is our biggest challenge in our work is balancing the need. It's emotional intelligence, right? You've got to look at people's real facial expressions and interact with them, and they want coaching and support. We can't just throw stuff online and then download it and teach it. There has to be a balance of this face-to-face and online training. And I'll end with my big hope. I am on a vision, or have a vision. I have a large mission. I think the question no longer is, does emotional intelligence matter? What the question really is how do we get these skills and tools to all stakeholders around the nation and other countries? Because my hope is that by teaching these skills, we can create a healthier, more compassionate, more equitable, and just effective society. Thank you so much.